Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I am your host, Courtney Anderson. I'm so happy that you're here. I would encourage you to please stop by CourtneyAnderson.com, and we are constantly adding new material. I'd ask you to come to our show page for this um, episode of our show, which is, of course, our podcast, our radio show audio podcast. And share your feedback, any ideas that you have. I'd also ask that you go to iTunes and put a little bit of your feedback and rating there for us. The show is more successful than I had anticipated, which is awesome and exciting, and I'm grateful to you. But I certainly now am having to do a better job of sharing with you all of the things that we can do together to continue to be able to take part in this program. I also want to let you know that today's show is one of our series from our Joyful Art of Business series. And of course, that's all about that fundamental principle that we have in our professional life, that everything that we're doing, because we're doing it, we're just labeling it art. Why not? And actually, I think it's a defensible position. Obviously, I wouldn't make it if I didn't. I think that whatever we're doing, if it's volunteer work, if it's paid work, we're doing it. And we can do it in a way where we bring our own special personality and experience to it. And so why not label it artistic? Because in many ways it is. And I think it also creates an entire new dimension for us to explore who we are, how we relate to the world, and to value what we do. And of course, I just label business. I label everything that we do business. That's our work. And again, it doesn't have to be paid. It can be volunteer. It what I'm doing with this concept is, again, trying to help us infuse what we're doing, that it's not some sort of horrible drudgery, that it's something that we're at some level able to interject our own unique world experience into. So it's art. I'm labeling it business generically so that we can start to think about woo start to think about process, so that we're finding a way to meet and surpass our goals. And the most, of course, important part of this is that we're looking at it and we're asking ourselves, how do I feel? How do I feel about the stuff that I do, that we're calling business? Am I miserable? Am I excited? And we're trying to make sure that we're including that assessment of our ROI, return on our investment, of our emotional and psychological well-being. There's no point in doing something and being miserable, especially when when we have a position and we get to a point in our lives where so many of our needs are met. So if we're able to have healthy food choices, if we're able to have shelter, if we're able to have some level of financial resources, then we really want to make sure that we're now looking beyond just sort of those meeting those basic needs and asking ourselves, what am I, how do I feel about this? And again, it's trying to avoid that sort of one of the things that I think is one of the worst outcomes, which is where someone is objectively successful. So other people look at them and think, wow, that's a great job. It's a great um, um, position title. It's a wonderful lifestyle that they have, or look at the acclaim that they have as for all of their volunteer work and recognition, and yet the person is really miserable and unhappy. And we don't want that, right? We want to look at the entire totality, 360-degree assessment of what we're doing. How do I feel about it? How does it impact me at a very basic level in terms of my entire orientation to the world? Do I wake up in the morning like, wow, I can't wait to get started? Do I wake up in the morning like, I think it'll be a interesting day? Or do I wake up and think, oh, I just want to go back to sleep because I dread it? I don't want to do it. I'm miserable even thinking about it. So that's of course our series. And one of the things that we are looking at in this episode is we're asking ourselves in this episode, is a specific type of behavior or practice, is it something that might be required for me to achieve some level of professional success? And specifically, our show title is Reciprocity. Is it required for professional success? Reciprocity. Is it required for professional success? So I'm going to get right to quote the answer. And certainly, if you're part of our programs and all the different educational experiences that we provide through our shows and through our corporate education programs and things of that nature, then you're fully aware that normally I don't. I usually will argue vehemently that there isn't the answer in most situations in life. Sometimes there is though, right? Is it raining outside? Um, the front door where I am right now. That's an answer I can give you a yes or no. Um, so the answer to our show episode question, which is again reciprocity, is it required for professional success? Yes. The answer is yes. Why am I deviating from my normal argument that we just can't have these absolutes? Well, let's talk about it and let's dive into it. As I was saying earlier, I do encourage you, no matter where you have located our show today, to drop by CourtneyAnderson.com, come to our podcast, audio podcast, radio show section, and then come on over to the show page. For each of our episodes, we have a show page where I have more room, more screen room to put additional information, more links, and of course to highlight our commercial sponsors for each show. So there's also the opportunity, though, for you to tell the world what you think and help be part of the continuation of the improvement of this program so that it's of service. And one of the things that you'll see on the show notes is I went back to one of my favorite resources, right? A dictionary, and we do that in so many programs because a we need to clarify exactly what we're talking about, and a lot of people will think, well, really, do we need to define words? Yeah, we do. A because I've certainly been in education, whether it's corporate education or educating students in universities for quite a while, and there's not always an understanding of exactly what the defined and understood definition is of a term when we start talking about things, and it can often lead to confusion and people making decisions that aren't probably the most effective. So we're back at our dictionary. In the show notes, you'll see I went to Merriam-Webster, and let's see what our dictionary definition is. Our dictionary definition is, now this is for reciprocity, right? So the whole show episode is it names the word reciprocity, and then it asks a question: is this right? Is it required for professional success? So whatever this thing called reciprocity is, I need to find out: is it something I have to have for being successful professionally, or not? The dictionary says reciprocity is a situation or relationship in which two people or groups agree to do something similar for each other, to allow each other to have the same rights, etc. A, a reciprocal arrangement or relationship. All right, so reciprocity is a situation or relationship in which two people or groups agree to do something similar for each other. That sounds simple. To allow each other to have the same rights, etc. A reciprocal arrangement or relationship. So far, I like this. Okay, so this thing, reciprocity, means that two individuals or two groups of people, two or more, we're doing something, right? So I'm going to do something similar for the other person or group, and they're going to do something similar for me. And this is going to allow each other to have the same rights. So when you're looking at the show notes, I would underline that. Okay. The the key, of course, to everything that we're doing in these programs is we're trying to always address this issue of how may we surpass our goals, right? And there's a lot of reasons why we ask that question, of course, because the idea of everything from our self image to our self confidence to feelings of contentment, having a stable life. So much of our well being is tied to these ideas of that we have meaning, that our lives have meaning, um, and that at some level we're comfortable with who we are. And when we feel like we're not meeting or even coming close in any to meeting what our goals are. And remember, our goals, some of them are really specific, right? Some people say, well, unless I become vice president of this specific company, I'll be miserable forever. All right, well, maybe there's pros and cons to that. On one level, it's very well defined. It's a very well defined goal, right? On the other hand, it's kind of limiting because why couldn't you be, at a different, business at, that same job title, or why couldn't you be at that business that you really want to be at that you've named, but yet be a different level? Maybe you won't be vice president. Maybe you'll be, assistant vice president. Who knows? The point is that we're trying to holistically approach our lives and then again wake up and have some positive feelings about what we're going to do that day, about ourselves, about our lives, because the absence of that, of course, can create very negative outcomes where people get so mired in a situation where they feel like they quote have no hope, right? And they'll tell you that they're miserable with themselves and they're disappointed with themselves and disappointed in other people, and they there's no quality of life there. And we're trying as much as we can do with our program and with our resources and with our community, to prevent that, or when it happens, to mitigate it. To mitigate it because we want to get the most we can out of this life, right? So when we ask ourselves about reciprocity is required for professional success, and we talk about having the same rights, that language in the definition, right? We're allowing each other to have the same rights, okay? Because we're doing something similar for each other. This idea of equality, of having the same rights, of equal treatment. Now, it ties into so many different issues. Now, many of you have been part of many of our different programs, and certainly in our Law Lovers Lounge, we talk a lot about obviously laws. And as I am a lawyer and attorney and teach and of course have practiced law for since the late 1990s, then the idea of equal rights, having the same rights, again, equal treatment under the law, it of course touches on so many legal frameworks in many different parts of the world. And it's important, right? So when you think about reciprocity, we think about it as two individuals. We can think about it as two groups. We can also think about it as an individual and a group, or an individual and a collective, maybe an individual and a government, right? Reciprocity. The idea that the parties, right, are agreeing to do something similar so that we are allowing each other to have the same rights, to be respected equally, to be treated equally. And my argument, of course, in this episode, which I already very early on gave sort of an absolute answer, and I said, yes, this is required for professional success. Now, of course, we have other programs where we really try to digest what does it mean to be successful, and my argument is it's mostly subjective. And by mostly, I mean overwhelmingly. Meaning subjective, meaning you decide. So if you wake up and you begin whatever your new time is, awake and alert, and you feel good, then it's irrelevant in my perspective what other people think. If you're super, uh, you know, excited about your day, and let's say that I saw a show, it was a documentary show, and it was a gentleman who was just devoting his time and his resources to turtles, to mostly really large sort of tortoise, right? The large um, reptiles, turtles. And it was fascinating. Now, I don't know much about turtles or different types of tortoise uh, species or uh, uh, anything really. I mean, other than, I mean, in my life, I've spent a little bit of time around turtles, but the whole point of it was he was so excited in this show and he was talking about and he was sharing and he was, taking another person through all he was doing with all of the different programs and he was introducing and sharing about individual turtles and talking about them and their lives. And it might sound a bit silly to someone else, or someone else might say, well, what? Like, what about being vice president of a big company? Or, what about being part of a nonprofit or an NGO, non-government organization, and being out there saving the world or eradicating an illness or something? Who would really care about something like dealing, you wake up and you deal with turtles. But the point is that success is subjective, meaning the person decides. And if the person is really passionate and feels that there's purpose and meaning to who they are and what they're doing, and they're excited about it, and it brings them those joy is not, I've never made the point that it's supposed to be some sort of sustained, state where you're just sort of frozen in joy all the time. Oh, I'm joyful. Whew, I was joyful then. I'm joyful this moment. I'm going to be joyful for the next 24 hours nonstop. I mean, that's not rational. We of course have to sleep. And the other thing is that our feelings are going to ebb and flow. I'm just saying that overall, big picture, if you ask somebody, how do you feel about, your life? How do you feel about your professional activities, which again may be volunteer or paid or what, in the home or out of the home? If they say I feel pretty good, then that's good enough because there's flashes of joy and there's also flashes of stress and anger and disappointment. But overall, you anticipate it. You don't want it to end because sure there are moments that might make you upset or stressed or sad or hurt or disappointed, but overall you're interested each time you wake up to see what happens next. And that's what we're trying to do, keep people invested in life. And so this person was showing this thing about the turtles, and my point was that even though it wouldn't be necessarily something where I would have thought to myself that's my goal or that's what I would define as success necessarily, just because I really don't know much about that. By watching that show and the gentleman was like sharing different threats to different types of turtle environments. Obviously, we can think about different types of issues that would threaten natural habitat environments around the world, and it was really really interesting. It really was, and then it did what it should have done. His passion and enthusiasm, which created someone to come and share his knowledge and film it and put this show out. I'm just sitting on my couch, right? And I don't even know anything about this, but it was so interesting to me. He was so passionate, and he had very specific goals about some of the natural environments, about some of the population numbers for different types of turtles. And he was able to define, articulate, and share those goals in such a way that it made me interested in them. And then I went on my tablet and started reading more. I went beyond just, with the show to go read more. And that's the most wonderful gift. He was of service to him, I don't know him and he doesn't know me, but he was able to take something that mattered to him and to pursue it in such a way that he manifested real life actions and consequences. And so people were able to come and film, and he was able to walk around and show them and introduce them to different individual animals that he'd worked with and that he cared about, and talk about collective populations and locations for again natural habitats. And even though it wasn't his intent that some random person sitting on their couch somewhere in some city he may never have even been to would have seen it or cared, that's what happened. He shared that knowledge with me in such a way that I went and then looked on my tablet to read more and found his organization and put that on the list of places that I'd like to contribute to and learn more about. And it's interesting. Do you see it? It also enriched my life because I didn't know anything about this. This is all of what I'm saying, is that success is relative. If you are interested in what you're doing, whether it's turtles or finance or being a stay-at-home parent or being a watercolor expert or being a professional skateboarder or you like to hula dance, I don't care what it is. It's subjective, meaning you are going to determine whether or not you're successful. And my argument is, my question is in the metric for is it, are you successful, or what I just said. When you wake up, how do you feel? If every day you wake up and you think, oh, there's nothing for me in this on this planet, I don't really care about anything, there's a problem. If you wake up and you think, oh, I'm not feeling well, my stomach hurts, oh, I'm a little stressed out, but I got to go see how my turtles are doing, or I can't wait to get to my next, watercolor painting, or I've got to go get on, my hula hoop later, and that kind of has you a little bit flashes of joy and excitement and interest, then you're on the right path. And so the question is reciprocity required for this professional success? I've gone through trying to argue that success is you define it, and I told you what the metrics are. So how do you know if you have it? Well, how do you feel when you wake up? We just went over some examples, and I was trying to give an example how when you go out and you make it your mission to find your success and then go out and manifest it, meaning you do things about it. So not just that you love turtles and you sit and think about it, that's the first step, but then you have to go out and take steps so that eventually, hopefully, you're able to do things in the world where you can invite other people to learn and share knowledge and be touched by and improved by what you're doing. So the gentleman who is out working with the turtles, that's the manifestation of it, right? That's the step beyond just thinking about it. Professional success we're talking about specifically, so what you're doing in your work, right? So again, it could be paid, it could be volunteer, it could be full-time, it could be part-time, it could be temporary, it's irrelevant. um, it could be in your home with your family and loved ones. It could be with your pets, it could be with at a for-profit business, it could be at a governmental agency. Again, it's irrelevant, but we're not talking about your personal success, which is your health, your relationships with your family, friends, loved ones. We're talking about your work, which all of this should be part of your life at some level, and different measurements and in different manifestations for us. But we all need to have um, investments in ourselves, obviously, our health and how we treat ourselves and how we treat other people. And we need to have investments in something that we do that we're going to call our work. And in the sphere of our professional success, it's subjective. So you're going to define what that is. The question, though, once you define that, do you need to have this exchange where with other people or other groups, you're doing things that are similar for each other so that you have the same rights? Go back to that where you've underlined it in your notes, or you're looking at the show notes and you say, yeah, I see that in the definition. Because here's the deal. Without reciprocity, then you're not going to have the ability for professional success, because you're going to put yourself in a position often where someone is taken advantage of, and someone is therefore not being treated with the same rights. So sort of look at it, right? It's the scales of justice, right? So I'm going to do a little for you, you do a little for me. It's reciprocity. It could be two people. It could be my boss and I. It could be my coworker and I. It could be my customer and I. It could be my neighbor and I. It could be, again, my department and the other department. It could be my NGO and another NGO. It could be um, myself and an organization, or myself and a group. But there must be this idea that we're somewhat having balance. Not that we're always balanced. So there are going to be times when I've done something for the other side, and then I'm sort of and waiting for them to respond and reciprocate that. So it'll be a little bit tipped. But over time, it's gonna ebb and flow. But it's gonna always try to come back to that equilibrium where we have the same right. So I'll treat you and you treat me with respect, and see, it's a win-win. Now we don't have the same um, responsibilities. So, if I work at a big for profit company and I have a boss, then, my boss has very different responsibilities than I do. They have a different job. They're going to be paid more than I do. They have more, um, perks and benefits because they have more responsibility than I do. I have a different job. So my boss is going to have opportunities to reciprocate, and I'm going to have opportunities to reciprocate with them. But it's not that we're doing the same work. It's just that our relationship is based on that we have the same rights. As I would argue, you can look at this from a humanist perspective. You can look at it from an ethical perspective. But the idea that If the big boss, right, of the for profit says, hey, you need to go and you need to work from the moment you wake up until 16 hours later, and you don't have any time to eat or breaks or anything else. You just work, 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 work. Except for using the restroom, there's not a time that you're not going to work. And I will pay you, whatever I feel like, whenever I feel like it, if anything. Or maybe I'll just, tell you later, hey, thanks for doing all that work. And that's it. Now, people would say, well, that's stupid. That would never happen. Well, it does happen. It has happened historically all over the world. There have been people who worked for-profit organizations, whether it was a large business or a farm or a plantation or a household, and they don't get any wages. That's happened in the past in our history as humans around the world. It happens today. Sometimes those types of relationships are called slavery. Sometimes you have relationships where people were basically indentured servants, forever. But there's not a lot of reciprocity or really any, you know, depending on your perspective. And what we've tried to move to over time is in modern times in the legal systems in most countries, the majority of countries in the world today, on paper at least, the argument is sure, I have the right to work in many instances, and then to be treated right, um, with rights for pay. So I'll know how much I'm going to get paid ahead of time. I'll know when I'll get paid. Um, I will have certain amounts of rights in terms of how many breaks I would get, or my ability to make sure that I'm able to maintain nutrition while I'm working. The reciprocity is, in a very simple form, they're really, oh, this is so lawyerly of me, but it's how I see it. And in a really simple form, they're really basic, simple contracts. And I'm not arguing that I'm not getting into the meat of whether or not the contract's enforceable, whether or not the contract meets all the terms that the law would require for an enforceable contract. But I'm basically saying, though, that the idea is I'm going to do something for you, you're going to do something for me. We don't have the same necessarily responsibilities, but we have the same rights. We're both um, entitled to being treated with respect, things of this nature. And we're going to make a deal. So I'm going to go be an employee, fine. But what's the deal is I know how much money I'm going to make up front. I know when I'm going to get paid. I know how I'm going to get paid. And I know what my work is supposed to be. I know how long it's supposed to take. And I'm going to do my part. I'm going to meet my responsibilities on that, right? I'm going to do for the other side. And the other side's going to has the same, they're going to do for me. So the other side's not going to be able to change the deal later and say, hey, you know, we're not going to pay you anything. That would be wrong. And that would be illegal. The idea also, though, is that I said if we don't have reciprocity in the absence of this, we have the potential for someone to be taken advantage of, right? That's where some people are not treated with the same rights. And I started to give the example of, well, okay, it's a big for-profit, and I'm an employee, and now they're taking advantage of me because they're not going to give me wages, or they're not going to pay me the wages we agreed to, or they're not going to pay me when they said they were, things of this nature. But those are, of course, that's an extreme example. Well, again, I would argue that it does happen more than people realize. But the more common issue with reciprocity is how it impacts what we sort of largely call office politics, right? So someone will say to me, and I've had this happen recently, they'll be talking to me about a work situation, and they're saying to me, oh, it's just awful. I really wanted a certain job title or promotion. And, I've worked at this place, X number of years. And I've done all these, I volunteered for this extra thing and that extra thing, and I did this for the supervisor, I did that, and their argument was, I did all of those things, extra things, because I was showing them that I'm really dedicated. And then in response, I believed that they would reciprocate, that they would return what I gave them: extra time, volunteer service, running extra errands for the supervisor or doing extra things that I was asked to do. I did all of those things with the belief that they would reciprocate and then go ahead and give me the promotion or the other job that I wanted that was higher paying or better benefits or whatever. And my argument is that's not logical. Reciprocity, you must look at it like this. You do it in increments, right? Because we talked about equilibrium, right? We talked about a scale where, okay, I did a little bit something extra, and now I'm going to, you know, look for the reciprocity part, and then the scales which were unbalanced because I was out there doing a little bit more, it'll be balanced because then they'll reciprocate, and then we'll get back to equilibrium, and then somebody else will do something, and then it'll be a little unbalanced, and then we'll respond, and we'll get back to reciprocity, right? To equilibrium. But it needs to be incremental. If your argument to me is, hey, I did everything. I went early and I stayed late and I did extra things for the boss and I volunteered for this and that and I ran errands and, I did all this and I did all these things because I was now, feeling like now they have to go ahead and reciprocate and give me the promotion or the better job or the better benefits or whatever. No, it has to be incremental. So if I sat down and said to you, okay, let's talk about your reciprocity at your professional work, and let's say the person, okay, great, and I said, okay, write down the last 10 things that you did for them and the last 10 things that they did for you. Because look again at our dictionary definition: relationship, right? Situation, relationship, two people or groups agree to do something similar. Now, agree is an important part. Now, the agreement could be that the people sat down and said, okay, I'm going to volunteer a little bit extra around the office to help with some of these tasks that aren't specifically part of my job, and then you're going to agree that when the next promotion opportunity is available, that I'll be considered. That could happen, and sometimes those do happen, really explicit agreements. So most of the time, it's not spoken explicitly like that. That's why I said it has to be incremental. So the agreement is the person does one volunteer issue, and then they wait for the it to be reciprocated. That's why I said when I'm counseling and mentoring and coaching people, and I say to them, write down for me, the last 5 or 10 things that you've done, and then write down for me the last 5 or 10 things that they've done. And what I'll see when this is off balance is the person will write down, 30 things that they've done, to reciprocate. I went by my boss and got to help them with an errand that they needed. And, then I took 3 hours out of my workday to go listen to my boss about this other issue that really wasn't even part of my job, but I was trying to show how much I care and that I got behind on my work. And then I, took extra work and stayed late and had to work, in my hours when I really shouldn't have been. Okay. And they'll have 20 or 30 things that they've done, and they'll have like 1 or 2 things that the other side has done. And there we have right now, it's not reciprocal. Right? Go back and look at the dictionary definition. Situation or relationship, two people or groups agree. Now the agreement again could be upfront ahead of time. Like I said, many of the agreements actually are. In most parts of the world, the law requires you. Part of the agreement is you're going to be paid X amount of dollars, or you're going to work X amount of hours, or you're going to do X amount of tasks, and you'll be paid within, so many days or so many weeks of, completing your work. I mean, these things are written down. It's explicit. Some of them are, laws. Some people will go a step further and individually, and say, hey, I'm going to do these volunteer things around the office. My expectation, though, is then when the next opportunity comes up for promotion to the next level, that I'm going to be considered. That's a little bit more rare, just due to the most cultures, most businesses, people would feel uncomfortable doing that. But it is required, and I did say required, for professional success, again, which is subjective, defined by you, that the reciprocity exists. And how do you know it's there? I told you, write down the last, pick a number. Pick 5 or pick 10 and write down the 5 or 10 things that you've done. And then take the same number, 5 or 10, the same number you have for yourself, and write down what they've done. If you can't come up with anything they've done, or you can only come up with one thing they've done, or you get into the situation, as I mentioned, I was mentoring or speaking with someone, and they were giving me this long, very sort of, it was a very angry, discussion about how hurt they were, how disappointed they were, how frustrated they were, that they perceived that they're not treated with the same rights, they're not respected. And they had a long list. I don't even know how long it would have been if we, had the time to just do a comprehensive list of things that they did. And then they had a laundry list of disappointment in what wasn't done by the other side, right? How do you prevent that from happening? Well, you do whatever that thing is, right? The act. And then you wait to see if it's reciprocated, meaning does the other side return? If you do something, this is why I said it's incremental. You don't go out and do 75 things and then sit there and say, well, I did 75 things, they've done nothing. I wasn't even, forget about being considered for being promoted. I was, my hours were cut back. Like it's got even worse. My situation is awful. And I did all of these things and they do nothing. And in fact, they don't, not just do they do nothing to help, with my goals, they've actually made my situation worse, right? They've taken me further away from my goals. My argument is they did not do that to you, that you did that to you because you did not adhere to the entire episode topic today, which is reciprocity. You do a little and then you wait to see that it's responded to a level that you feel inclined. So if you went ahead and you volunteered, oh, it's okay, I'll take care of that, planning the office, luncheon, that your boss mentioned, and you do it and you did a great job. Okay. And then your boss later, so I want to tell everybody at the luncheon that, we have to give a big, huge, thank you to so and so for being the one that planned it and made it happen, and I really appreciate it. Okay, that's part of the reciprocity. You did all this hard work and your boss has publicly acknowledged it in front of everyone, and even though you're humble and embarrassed, oh, I don't need any thank yous or applause, but it's reciprocity. It's part of it, right? The public acknowledgement. Then it was incremental. But you don't just do something and then do another thing 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 and then stand around and say, well, I've done all these things and look at what they've done to me. They have done nothing to treat me with the same rights. They've done nothing to have this relationship where it's one where we're doing similar for each other. Because no, they're not. Because again, I'm not arguing that that was the right or wrong thing to do. Sort of, I hate those words, but that they shouldn't have stepped in faster and done these things. An ideal world, yes, but we talk about all the time, and we have so many other programs we talk about why do people do what they do, or what or why do organizations do what they do? Because they want to and they're allowed to. So if somebody doesn't reciprocate, the lack of reciprocity is the answer for you about what you need to do. So let's say you do something like the dictionary definition, or I'm doing something similar, right? I do this great, wonderful thing, and then I'm waiting for for it to be returned, for them to do something similar. It could be a thank you, it could be a public acknowledgement, it could be assigning me to a special project that I really wanted. It could be sitting down and talking to me about some of my goals and aspirations. It could be all kind of things. It could be a good evaluation. I mean, we don't know. But if you do the thing and then you sit, maybe sit physically, maybe stand. I'm not saying physically, but I'm saying you wait and you just wait to see what the other side does. Okay? So if the other side does something, then you can assess, okay, was that in my mind equal to what I gave? And if it wasn't, and if it was less than what I feel I did, then that means you're going to calibrate down what you do next to sort of match the level of what they did. Right? So when they give less, you give less. When they give more, you give more. When they give nothing, what do you think you give? Now we need to be really clear. What we're talking about is above and beyond whatever the bare minimum requirements are. So the bare minimum requirements are they have to, again, with this same example of a for-profit employer, they have to pay, the legal wages they agreed to, when they said they would do it, how they said they would pay it. They can't change that. But beyond that, do they have to invest in you and your career? Do they have to give you glowing, evaluations? Do they have to spend time helping you become better at your profession? Do they have to give you public accolades? All this kind of stuff is not required. On the other hand, what are you doing? What are the basics you're required to do? Well, You have to do exactly what the basics are that are going to entitle you to the pay that you have agreed to at the rate you've agreed to. So when I say that they didn't do anything, then you do nothing, I don't mean that you don't show up for work. Because when you did that, then you violated what the basic agreement was. The basic agreement was, I'm going to do X number of tasks or services for X number of income. If you stop doing the tasks and services, then they're going to take away the job. They should. Because if you're not doing it at all, then you're not entitled to anything. What I meant by do nothing is all that above and beyond. When I talk to people who get angry and who I feel have made an inappropriate assessment of the reciprocity, it's never because they totally have quit the job, like they just quit showing up. Because when you quit showing up, then most people, I mean, I've talked to some people who still are angry at that point. But by the time most people just say, forget about it, I'm not even doing anything. I'm done, right? Then people aren't really angry because they don't have anything else to do with it, right? They broke up the relationship. It's when someone's in a relationship and they feel like they're giving, everything and the other side's giving, almost nothing or nothing. And that's when they get all this anger and this frustration and the pain, disappointment and these things. And they're very awful. And my argument is we don't want that to happen to anybody. How do we prevent it? Well, exactly what the show is. I mean, this entire show is to try to stop it. You must remember, it's incremental. I'll do a little nice something extra and then wait. Did you get anything in response? Well, okay, then that means then you're not going to do this something extra. It doesn't mean you're not going to do what you're required to do. It's what it's done is it's given you the answer to tell you that this isn't the place. This isn't the time. They're not going to invest in whatever those extra things were that you needed and desired and wanted. That's not happening with them. That doesn't mean it's not happening. It just means to me it's great. You're not going to spend time doing 75 extra above and beyond tasks because you're going to take that time and you're going to do 75 things for yourself, which might be improving your skills, sending out different job feelers, getting a resume together, and finding a different place or a different department or a different boss or a different location where they will do what you need. And these aren't things these are what you need to feel, again, that you're practicing your own joyful art of business. And if you're not getting it where you are and you give them the opportunity to reciprocate and they don't, that is the answer. They're not going to reciprocate, at least with the people they have right now at the time. So you can do a couple things. You can give it time, right? Maybe you'll wait a few months or weeks or whatever, and then you'll say, okay, I'll try another one. And you do another super nice thing. And then you'll wait and see. It may be that then you'll get two responses where the other side says, "Oh my goodness, I know a few months ago you really stepped up to the plate and you really helped out with that extra project, and I didn't, have the time at that moment because we were all working on the budget, but I want you to know how much it meant." Okay, great. See? It's a win-win. They did notice it. It just wasn't the right time and they weren't able to respond and reciprocate. Now they are. That could happen. It could happen that you do two things and they do nothing. And this tells you that, again, you calibrate your response to what they give you in return. That's why it's called reciprocity. But you don't go out and do laundry lists of extra things and then yell and scream or cry or be hurt that you did all these things and they didn't do anything. Well, first, and because when you go ask them on the other side, they'll say, "We never told them to do those things." And that's the truth. They didn't. I am so passionate about this because, like I said, when I work with people who don't understand that it is required for professional success that you reciprocate, that means you do the nice thing and you have to have that quiet, restful time where you let the other side respond. They're going to do something, they're going to do nothing. That's the response. If they do nothing, that tells you that you need to not do anything else right now. You might want to wait a little bit of time, or you might want to start working on those other activities so you can relocate to a different department or team or unit or organization so you can be with the people then who will respond. That's a win-win. But you can't have a situation where the other side shows you with their behavior that they're not reciprocating and then you keep escalating your giving and make the argument to me, well, that should do something. Of course it's not. That's all you can control is your side of the equation. You don't need control over their side of the equation. And they have their own choices and they have a multitude of reasons why they do what they do. Some of which you know and some of which are beyond your knowledge. And the point simply is that you don't need to know why. You just need to know what. Did they respond? What did they do? If they have not reciprocated at all, then all that means is you hold back and you don't give any more extra super awesome volunteer activity while they're not giving you anything that's above and beyond the bare minimum. If they give you bare minimum, then you give them bare minimum with your own artistic, creative, fun part. But you're not going to do things that put you in a situation where you're being taken advantage of, right? And this is so easy. You just watch and see what they do. And if you do that and you calibrate your response to their response, then you're not going to get in a situation where you feel that you were taken advantage of, or you felt like there was some implicit promise of promotion or opportunity that never came to fruition because you never saw anything. You must make your list. List the 5 or 10 things that you've done and list the 5 or 10 things that they've done. And then look at that list. Don't lie to yourself. Don't pretend. Look at the reality of the numbers. In this situation and in so many situations, we don't have to have any confusion or distress or fear or anything. It's just measurable. When you're in a situation that's a healthy reciprocal relationship, then just like the definition in the dictionary, you do something similar, they do something similar for you. You both have the same rights, and there's that feeling of equilibrium. Do you see? It's a win-win. Okay. Um, I again want to thank you for joining me. It means everything to me that this show again has been so well received. And now we're structuring it and doing more to ensure the viability of the program. And I'm doing everything I can on a daily basis to improve it. So share with me your feedback. Come to CourtneyAnderson.com. Go to iTunes and leave your rating. Where if Please share on social media or anywhere else what we're doing if you think it's of potential service to someone. And of course, we have added our show sponsors. Thank goodness. Our commercial sponsors are what allows us to provide our programs. This show, we talked all about reciprocal relationships, and we actually have a retail organization that I have been a customer intermittently over the probably, I don't know, I know it's well over a decade, and it's Best Buy. So Best Buy, BEST, and then Buy, BUI. Best Buy is a retail electronics consumer store. The two things I want to mention: one, please come to our show page and or access our Best Buy links in the show. Of course, to our sponsor, so that helps us keep the show going and more importantly growing. And I want to talk about two things about reciprocity. One, Best Buy does have a program, a trade-in program. So what do you can buy computers, you can buy televisions, you can buy appliances there, washing machines, and they have two things that I personally love, which is one of the reasons it's reciprocal, right? Like the advertisers and potential sponsors select and approve what we do here at CourtneyAnderson.com, and then I also select and approve what they do, so that we're both comfortable that we're the type of organizations to work with. So the two things I know personally that I wanted to mention for Best Buy. One, they have the trade-in program. So it's what it sounds like. You can take some other item you have that's, you maybe, gently used that you've had for a while, or you want a newer version or better version. You can go there and they'll give you a store credit, assuming it, meets whatever the requirements are, and you literally can trade in, right? So I bring some old stuff that I want a newer, you know, video game or whatever, and then you'll get a credit and then apply that to go out and get something else. So it's a kind of, that's reciprocal, right? So definitely look at that. The other thing that I do love, and I've always loved, they have in many other locations, they have what they call these open box items, and it's what it sounds like. So it came in, maybe somebody purchased it and then decided they didn't like it and brought it back. So it's an open box item. So it's a cheaper item, and I have purchased quite a few things over the years there. In our financial fierceness series and other series, we talk a lot about making sure we're getting good bargains and being discerning customers so that we invest our money on the best long-term solutions, right? We don't just go out and spend everything we have, because then we won't have any money, and then that'll move us away from meeting so many of our goals. So the open box buys are also something I strongly recommend. So please check out our sponsor again. That's Best Buy, and and thank you. Thank you for being part of the program. And please, 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 if this reciprocal issue is something that you struggle with, is something that it sort of um, spoke to you, make your list. Make that list of what you do for them, quote unquote, and what they do for you, quote unquote, and then look at it. And then how do you stop this and fix it? You stop escalating. Don't do anything else. Now, again, this is above and beyond. Of course, you're going to do what you're required to do because, well, of course. But the time you took doing those extra things and hoping and waiting and all of this, that maybe they would one day do something, take that time and do something for yourself and do it now. And maybe, like, we gave an example, they'll come around and say, oh, I know we didn't say anything for the last year, but we're so proud of you, and please, and here's a great evaluation, and here's some new opportunities. Okay, wonderful. If that doesn't happen, then you've taken all that time that you were investing in doing all these extra above and beyond activities, you invested in yourself, whether it's skill development, or hobbies or whatever. It's your life, and you've either found a contentment and outlets outside of this endeavor that make you feel that everything is a win-win, or you may have found and located a different professional location and activity so that you're going to move on. It's still a win-win, but look at the list. Reciprocity is a beautiful thing, and I'm closing with, when I first looked at the show notes and I remembered lyrics to a Grammy Award winning amazing album that came out a while ago now, by Lauryn Hill. And so if you look in the show notes, I just have the link, and the album was The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, which is a brilliant album. Uh, um, I would argue I was going to say if you like that type of genre, but I would argue just probably for any music lover. And uh, the song is The X Factor, or X Factor, not the X Factor, but X Factor, EX Factor. And there's a lyric in there, and the lyric in the song is, and tell me who I have to be to get some reciprocity. And it's a love song. It's a broken love song about a relationship that um, fell apart or never was working. But it's all about this idea of reciprocity, because all of the things we talked about in the show today about professional success, surprise, they all apply in your personal life too. That's a different show, but you see in these personal relationships too, you have to have that reciprocity. You have to have that we're doing something similar for each other. We have to have that we have the same rights. And so again, if you haven't heard that song, you haven't listened to it in a long time, it's the fourth song on that album, Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. Artist is Lauryn Hill, and the song is X Factor, and it's just, I think, a beautiful artistic expression of this in a personal relationship, and she just sort of is asking. It really, she is. She's pleading. Tell me who I have to be to get some reciprocity. And you certainly understand it within the context of a love, a romance, but you can see it at work, right? That's that person at the office. He's doing all those things. I've done 50 extra things, and I didn't get any notice. I wasn't even given a good evaluation. And they're asking that same thing. Tell me who I have to be to get some reciprocity. And the answer is, you don't have to be anybody. But this isn't the right relationship for the reciprocity, and you have to stop giving, right? And then wait and see what they do. So I just artistically wanted to add that. So thanks again. I appreciate it. I encourage you again, come to CourtneyAnderson.com, come to iTunes, check out our show sponsor, Best Buy. And then I just gave my own artistic suggestion also, if you're interested in music, or if you wanted to look at that and listen to that song by Lauryn Hill. So thank you for being here, and continued success.